বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu Analysis for 5th June 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. RBI holds rates, cuts GDP forecast. So yesterday, the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee met for a review meeting. Now, after this, the RBI has decided that they are going to leave the benchmark interest rates unchanged, and they have reiterated that it would retain its accommodative stance for as long as necessary to revive and sustain growth on durable basis. As a part of it, it has cut its GDP growth forecast for the fiscal year by 100 basis points, meaning now the GDP forecast has been brought down to 9.5%. The RBI Monetary Policy MPC, after taking stock of the current macroeconomic situation and other financial conditions, and they have went over the impact that the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic had on our economy, and had voted unanimously to keep the policy report rate unchanged at 4%. While acknowledging the sudden rise of COVID-19 cases and fatalities and the impact that it had on our economy, which was slightly recovering, and as we discussed in few previous articles, we were the experts were thinking that we were going to see a V-shaped recovery or V-shaped economy recovery. But at the end of the day, they too have to rechange their prediction, stating that instead of a V-shaped recovery, we are going to see a W-shaped recovery. Meaning, after the first wave hit us, our economy was on a path of recovery, albeit a slow one, but we were going to definitely see a V-shaped recovery in our economic trajectory. But with the ferocity of second wave and the subsequent impact of lockdowns or mini lockdowns, as we call them, on the economy, now we are going to see a W-shaped recovery. While explaining the rationale behind the decision that the RBI MPC committee took, RBI Governor Shaktikant Das said that the forecast of a normal monsoon, the resilience of agriculture and farm economy, the adoption of COVID compatible operation models by businesses and gathering momentum of global recovery could all provide tailwinds to revival of domestic economy activity when the second wave abated. This is a little bit of foreshadowing in a sense that they are hoping that we are going to see a revival in agriculture economy, which also took a hit because of second wave had a great impact on rural economy. Now with a normal monsoon predicted by the IMD this year, or at least 10% higher in certain cases, because it also came out with another prediction that we are going to see a 10% increase in our monsoon this particular season. Now with everything that is being concerned as to where businesses have evolved to function well within the limits of COVID-19 safety protocols, and they had overcome certain roadblocks that were thrown at them during the pandemic. Now this is all hopeful, and we see the MPC and the RBI whole together is hopeful that we are going to see a revival in our economy, but it is also going to be a slow and painful process. Moving on to the next article, Delta variant led to most post-vaccine infections in Delhi. Particularly, this is regards to why there was a sudden increase of positive cases in people who got vaccinated either by first dose or in certain cases, or in this particular case, most of the cases were reported in patients who had received their both doses of vaccine. So, both CSIR and NCDC had observed that the strain which we saw in Delhi, which was named Delta subsequently by World Health Organization, having a very contentious issue with various nations, particularly the variant which B16172, which was famously called or dubbed as Indian variant across world news organizations and around the world, which was a little bit racist in nature, because the same was not applied to when the virus was emanating out of Wuhan, China. Now we have seen what Singapore had done when one of our chief ministers stated that the Singapore variant for the first time, and how Singaporean parliament and Singaporean government reacted to that statement also. So giving sensitivity, the World Health Organization decided to label COVID-19 variants. Subsequently, after multiple discussions, they have decided with a naming scheme involving alpha, beta, gamma, delta naming system. Now, they have clearly indicated these variants into two types. One is variants of concern and variants of interest. So, variants of concern are the variants of COVID-19 which are high risk in transmissibility or virulence. That is what we are seeing in Delhi case also. Variants of interest are the variants which can cause community transmission or multiple clusters and are detected in multiple countries. As far as both the strains, India has been witnessing both variants of concern and variants of interest. In variants of concern are regarding Delta, which is B161,672, and variants of interest is Kappa, which is B16171. So it goes both ways, right? First, we saw a variant coming out of United Kingdom that happened to get transmitted in India, and then it evolved into variant that we are seeing right now, which is more transmissible, and it went on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the new naming system involves two categories: variants of concerns and variants of interest. You can no longer term these variants from their place of origin, and you are supposed to use the designated name or the label that WHO came out for these particular variants of concern and variants of interest. Moving on, no decision on indemnity to vaccine makers yet. So we have realized that Pfizer has asked for an indemnity waiver if and when they decide to, or when they agree to export their vaccines from US to India. And subsequently, we have seen that both Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech has voiced the same reason, stating that if you are willing to give the indemnity clause waiver to foreign vaccine manufacturers, it would be fair only if that same waiver is applied to Indian manufacturers also. As far as the decision from the central government, there hasn't been any decision as far as the waiver or the advance payment that Pfizer has asked from the government of India to supply their vaccines into India. Moving on, Serum Institute gets a DCGI's nod to produce Sputnik 5. Now, the DCGI, the Drug Control General of India, has granted the permission for Serum Institute of India to manufacture the Sputnik 5 COVID vaccine after due considerations were done. Now, this is a collaboration between the Serum Institute of India and a research institute and a microbiological study center based out of Russia. So, in a decision that is going to certainly boost the number of vaccine doses that will be available to Government of India for administration all over India, this certainly will help in our drive to vaccinate at least 60% of the population by the end of this year. Remember, Sputnik 5 has already agreed for manufacturing with Dr. Reddy's laboratories in India, and they are currently supplying Sputnik 5 through way of imports from Russia, and they have started producing test batches in their facilities in Hyderabad and around India also. And yesterday we studied a case where the Panacea Biotech was also filing a case against the government of India for not giving them permission to manufacture the same set Sputnik 5 vaccine. That decision is still pending in front of the court. And in addition to that, Serum Institute now got the go ahead to manufacture Sputnik 5. Now, this is also going to be a test run where they'll manufacture a test batch which will be sent to various laboratories for testing, for tests and other clearances. Once they get the clearances and go ahead once again, now they can manufacture in large scales and they can directly supply it to vaccine distributors. So this is certainly a good news in terms of our vaccination drive, which has taken a abysmal pace in terms of vaccinating our population. Moving on to the next article, saving biodiversity, securing Earth's future. So June 5th is World Environmental Day, and this article particularly deals with one scheme that the government of India has adopted to save, protect and nurture biodiversity and variety of biodiversity in our country. The author here suggests that biodiversity also serves as a perpetual source of spiritual enrichment, intimately linked to our physical and mental well-being, which is absolutely true. And it is not only the point of your mental well-being or physical well-being, it is also a point of notion for being financially viable also, because conservative estimates do suggest that our forests alone may yield services worth more than trillion rupees per year, which is substantial when you are considering the pace that economy is growing right now. Now it also has to be understood that globally we have lost around 7% of intact forests since 2000 through various activities taken up by the human species. This is also a conservative estimate. It can be higher than 7%, and that is absolute truth. Now, a recent assessment which was conducted stated that over 1 million species might be lost forever in the next several decades alone, let alone protecting our biodiversity for the future. If things are going the current pace at which they are going right now, by the end of this decade alone, we may not see many species survive that longer, and we may push them beyond extinction and recovery. And sadly, our country is also no exception to these trends. The only way to come out of this is to repair the current dysfunctional relationship that we have with our nature surrounding us. That will not only ensure the survivability of the biodiversity that helps us sustain our way of lifestyles, it will also mitigate climate change and curtail future outbreaks of infectious disease that are known to bring unimaginable misery. If COVID-19 is anything to go by, for whatever reason we missed SARS, we missed MSR, and in other biological Ebola and every other biological virulent pandemics for whatever reasons, but this one struck us so bad that we now know the cost that is attached to future infectious diseases or virus outbreaks. So it is upon us to not only prepare us for the future devastation or misery that will be brought by future viruses or future virus outbreaks, in order to protect ourselves both financially and physically and mentally, we have to ensure that our biodiversity is also taking a recovery path along with us. Now, preserving biodiversity is directly relevant to social, economical and environmental well-being of people, because biodiversity is directly relevant. Social, you have an access or a connection with your surroundings, your environment. Economic, because it brings close to trillion rupees per year as a source of income from the products that we mine from the forest areas in our country. And environmental well-being also is directly related to how humans evolve as a species, because you are almost all interacting with biodiversity on a day-to-day basis. And with the current lifestyle that we have adopted, particularly in our country, there is no connection between, or a passive connection between, our biodiversity and our way of living. We have to change that as soon as we can. So it is high time for us to rethink and imagine the concept of one health for all living organisms, and that is including whatever the biota that is living in soils and sustain our agricultural systems. And we have to move away from our aggressive way of agricultural style to a very peaceful and a green way of green way of sustainable agricultural systems. We have been seeing great yields out of going for green agricultural systems than what we have adopted now, but the implementation and the scale have to be huge in terms to see results in a short period of time. Now, the particular interesting scheme that we are going to understand about in this article is, in 2018, the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council, in consultation with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and other ministries, approved an ambitious national mission on biodiversity and human well-being. So it is not only about the biodiversity of the ecosystem, it is well and within its entire conceptual that it is connected to our human well-being. So it has to be taken in a single breath, because you cannot separate human well-being without biodiversity and biodiversity sustainability without human well-being. So it has to go both ways. Now, the idea behind the National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Well-being is to strengthen the science of restoring, conserving, and sustainably utilizing India's nature heritage. Now, the idea is to embed biodiversity as a key consideration in all developmental projects, particularly in the case of agricultural and ecosystem services, health, bioeconomy, and climate change mitigation. One of the biggest crises that India is staring right now is climate change mitigation. Because for whatever reason, we are going to see an increase in severity of cyclones that we are going to see. We are going to see a high percentage or a sudden outburst of rainfall, which is going to damage crops, which will directly have an impact on our food security. Now, the idea behind this particular mission or this scheme is to establish a citizen and policy-oriented biodiversity information system, which will enhance capacity across all sectors for the realization of India's national biodiversity targets and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if this mission is implemented in the right way and with right spirit, this will certainly allow India to own at least 8% of global biodiversity on just 2.3% of global land area, which will contain sections of 4 of the 36 global biodiversity spots. And this will certainly help India emerge as a leader in demonstrating the given link between conservation of nature, assets, and social well-being. Now, the mission will help India meet its commitments under the new framework for Convention on Biological Diversity and Sustainable Development Goals under the United Nations. So, as far as the issues related to social issues, including poverty alleviation, justice and equity and protection of life, when you meet these goals, they in turn ensure that all these other 3 things, that is poverty alleviation, justice and equity, are taken care in a single umbrella. Now, the problem with the current mission is we need a strong and extensive cadre of human resources to meet these enormous and complex environmental challenges. And with the pandemic that is being thrown at us right now, whatever the plans of pooling of human resources that is needed to achieve these goals has been thrown out of order. It is high time for us to regain our strength and get back at working with this National Mission on Biodiversity that is linked with human well-being, and ensure that we reach the goals both in terms of our sustainable development goals and in terms of our commitments to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Moving on, DAC nod for building 6 conventional submarines. After 30-year delay, almost all 30 to 20 years of delay, the Defence Acquisition Council, which was headed and chaired by Rajnath Singh, Minister of Defence, approved the issuance of a request for proposal for the construction of 6 conventional submarines under Project 75I at an estimated cost of 43,000 crores. Now, during this meeting, it was also approved the procurement of air defense gun and ammunition for the army at an approximate cost of 6,000 crores. The idea behind this building of 6 conventional submarines in India at a cost of 43,000 crore rupees is to ensure that the construction of these submarines to take place in Indian shores. These are not outsourced. These submarines are to be built in India with tie-up with Indian manufacturers. Now, as far as the modernization of air defense guns, it has been long pending proposal, and the DAC accorded approval for the procurement of guns and ammunition under the Buy and Make in India campaign. So it's about indigenization at the same time and importing the critical needs that we need to fill critical gaps in our armaments and ammunitions. The project will take a little bit longer to come to realization stages, but nonetheless, after 30 years of lacking our capabilities in terms of fulfilling our critical needs in submarine warfare, this decision from the DAC does come as a relief in ensuring that we maintain at least some resemblance of a dominance in our Indian Ocean region, giving the rise of the naval fleet of the Chinese right now. As far as how the modalities are going to be, the modalities are still under a lot of discussion because it involves a lot of transfer of technology and transfer of construction from whoever wins the bidding to Indian shores. So all these things have to be worked out as of right now. Now moving on to the next article, push for citizenship to minority migrants. So the central government, that is Minister of External Home Affairs, has wrote to all states in March of last year, including Assam, sensitizing them of the relevant provisions under the Citizenship Act of 1955 that could help 6 communities, particularly Hindu, Christians, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists and Parsis, who have entered India before 2014 and are here on long-term visas, to expedite their citizenship application. Now, those migrants belonging to 6 non-Muslim minority countries, particularly from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, who came to India on valid documents before 2014, are now eligible to apply for online citizenship from any part of the country. Though the CAA is yet to come into force, as the rules of the CAA have not been notified to the ministry yet, this does come at a time when these people who don't have proper documents to gain employment here, providing them with citizenship documents and citizenship does help them in earning their own living. Now consider this, Assam is the only state where the National Registry of Citizens has been compiled. Now the compilation has not been without its controversy that you have to identify, but nonetheless Assam has been the only state where the NRC has been compliant, with more than 19 lakh of the 3.2 crore applicants in the states have been excluded from the final register, which modalities have to be still figured out, and there is a lot of issues that are surrounding it. Now, the state government of Assam has decided that re-verification of the process, as a large number of Hindus were left out, and they have requested that we have to conduct a complete re-verification because many of the Hindus were left out of the process itself to begin with. Now, the excluded persons from the 6 communities who are yet to be declared illegal migrants will certainly benefit from the CAA as and when it is implemented, as legislation benefits such migrants from these 3 neighboring countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., who have entered India illegally before 2014. So this is again a process of giving them legal documents as to they can earn their own living and they can be no longer this illegal alien kind of a identity that we associated with these migrants who came to India in fear of their lives or their social conditions. As far as this is concerned, on May of 28, the Minister of Home Affairs empowered 13 district collectors or 13 more district collectors in Gujarat, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Haryana and Punjab to grant citizenship certificates to applicants belonging to these 6 communities under the Section 5 of the Registration and Section 6 of the Naturalization of the Citizenship Act of 1955. Earlier in 2016, the same exercise was done by the MHA. Remember, though citizenship is a Home Ministry subject, Home Ministry has the authority to delegate these powers to states for specific objective, which in this case is a specific objective to grant citizenship to these all migrants who have entered India legally after 2014. Now, this is in relation to granting of citizenships to 6 minority communities that have escaped prosecution from our neighbors. Moving on to the next article, US vaccine gift may not be substantial. Yesterday we discussed about how Vice President and Prime Minister of India discussed about distribution of vaccines or the surplus vaccines that US government sits on right now through COVAX to South Asian region. Yesterday in the call between Prime Minister and the Vice President of United States, there was no clear-cut decision as to how many doses will India receive, and the call was pertaining to only the modalities, the nitty-gritties of how the vaccines will be distributed to our South Asian neighbors through COVAX mechanism. Now, the US NSA, US Chief NSA has come out and said that there is the US has decided to gift doses to India also, but now it has come clear when questions were asked as to how many doses will be gifted or given to India as part of its COVAX program. US has declined to give a particular number. Now we have few more details indicating that the number of doses that India is expecting from US may not be that substantial after all, because they are only expecting 2 to 3 million doses to be transferred from US stock to Indian government. Despite this, the US government has also taken a decision to lift sanctions on certain raw materials that Indian manufacturers need to manufacture Novavax. Though we might not get many doses, direct doses from US in terms of the AstraZeneca vaccine surplus they have right now, them lifting certain restrictions on exports of critical manufacturing medical equipment and medical raw materials for the manufacture of Novavax in Serum Institute, by way of lifting this restriction, or at least some restrictions on these exports of vaccine raw materials from US to India. This will certainly boost Indian manufacturing capacity by way of introducing a new vaccine called Novavax. If you remember, the Serum Institute of India CEO had tweeted at American president stating that if you want to help India, please ask your government to remove or lift restrictions that you have imposed on export of raw materials from, or particularly vaccine manufacturing raw materials that US is holding right now. Now, everybody during that period thought that he was talking about manufacturing of AstraZeneca, but not really. He was talking about the manufacturing or the raw materials required to manufacture a vaccine called Novavax. First, we are not getting many doses from US from their AstraZeneca surplus stock, but the US government decided to lift restrictions on their export of raw materials or vaccine raw materials, which will directly help our Serum Institute of India to ramp up vaccine production through through Novavax manufacturing vaccine. This is again a good news, but nonetheless, the gift that we were expecting in terms of the number of doses, we were expecting that the number of doses from US would be higher, but 2 to 3 million is good anyway when we don't have that many vaccines to administer. So two are good news in terms of India is getting vaccines and India is getting raw materials for Novavax from US. Moving on to the next article, INS Sadhyak decommissioned. So this vehicle was the first hydrographic vehicle that was indigenously built. This ship, what is hydrography? Hydrography is a survey ship that is a vessel designed to conduct hydrographic research and survey. Nautical charts are used to produce from this information to ensure safe navigation by military and civilian shipping. Hydrographic survey vessels also conduct seismic surveys of seabed and underlying geology. Now, this has been the first of its class in Indian Navy, which was built indigenously 40 years ago. After 40 years of service, this ship has been decommissioned in a low-key ceremony that was conducted in Vishakhapatnam. So the idea here is, I wanted to let you know about the process of what is hydrographic survey ship and what is the role that it plays. It maps the seabed, it conducts constant survey of our ocean, or at least areas ocean surrounding our border, in order to give a clear-cut map for our navy and shipping needs, also commercial or civilian. Moving on to the next article, expedite process of filling up judicial vacancies, CJI tells CJ. Now, after the Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramana, conducted a 2-day interaction with all the Chief Justices of all the High Courts in India. During this interaction, the Chief Justice of India requested all the CJIs, High Court CJIs, to complete or ensure the recommendations for judicial appointments to high courts to reflect the social diversity of the country. One of the crippling things that Indian judiciary is facing is lack of judges to take up the cases right now. There is a severe crunch of staff, there is a severe crunch of judges at all levels of judicial system in India, and even the Chief Justice of India reminding the fact that you have to ensure that appointments are made in the right time and the right order, and these appointments must be inclusive of whatever the diversities that India is and has. So one of the biggest criticisms the judiciary system India received was the lack of women in high courts or lower courts. judicial posts. Now, with this in mind, the future recommendations must include that seems to be the suggestion here. So, the Chief Justice of India has requested to reflect the modern diversity and modern times. The recommendation of the judicial appointments for the high courts also should reflect social diversity of the country. As far as the digital divide is concerned, various high court judges had raised that there is a clear-cut case of digital divide that they are seeing in their proceedings on a daily basis, and they have discussed what should be done also, and they have come up with a concept of conference vans to be deployed in various points of the towns and states to ensure this digital divide is reduced to a certain extent. And the CJ has said that they are going to take up this issue again with the central government and come up with a solution as to how to reduce this lack of connectivity issue and lack of digital divide. Moving on, amid US withdrawal, Beijing seeks closer Afghan ties. Now, yesterday we discussed that US is pulling out its troops completely on September 11th, leaving a vast vacuum of power in Afghanistan. Now, China seems to be engaging with Afghan and Pakistan. Yesterday we discussed that there are going to be a trilateral meeting between Afghanistan, Pakistan and China. Now, the initial thing that you have to understand, particularly Chinese actions in Afghanistan are concerned, is one thing. Whenever the US troops were present in the initial phases when China was actively engaging in Afghanistan, the Chinese were very vocal with the fact that America is an occupationary force and they have to leave immediately. So when they were saying all these things regarding the American presence in Afghanistan, they had this problem in Xinjiang province of terrorism. Though the cases were very low, 1 or 2, maybe 3, the Chinese government took the Xinjiang security project to a extreme level where they went for demographic changes, population control, outright detentions and building of concentration camps. So when they started seeing some sort of a resistance from the people of Xinjiang against the Chinese Communist Party, these people stopped making comments as to what America is doing in Afghanistan, because they were afraid that the security and whatever we are seeing in Afghanistan might get translated into the Xinjiang region of China. Now, China has been acting in Afghanistan keeping in mind the implications that they are seeing in Xinjiang province of China. Whatever the quotes that come out of the foreign minister of China, the need for strengthening cooperation for the sake of the region, all are in regards to how China perceives their own territorial security. China could have played a very important and a positive role in the development of Afghanistan over the past few years, but time and again they have chosen to play a negative role in the affairs of Afghanistan. Though China doesn't directly engage with the proxies of Taliban and so on and so forth, they use their own proxy, that is Pakistan, to get what they need in terms of resources and their political gains in Afghanistan. Again, it seems that Pakistan is playing a critical role, but at the end of the day, it is both Pakistan and China that are playing a critical role in the security and stability of Afghanistan. Moving on to the next article, no plan to print more money, asserts RBI chief. During the interaction with the media yesterday after the MPC, the RBI governor has said that there was no plan to print more money. Now the statement comes amid suggestions from various quarters, including inside RBI, that RBI to print more money to support the economy which is damaged by COVID-19. To this suggestion, the RBI governor observed that the government borrowing handled well, meaning whatever the borrowings that the governments were taking up, they were handled well and there was no need for further printing of money to support the economy. Coming to the next article, that is RBI's view on cryptocurrency stays have major concerns. Thus, now the RBI stance on cryptocurrency has been very vague in a sense, but very negative in essence. So let us understand what has been the RBI stance till now. It seems that the RBI hasn't made up its mind as to whether they have to allow cryptocurrencies to operate on Indian soil or not, because they had given out a memo or a circular a few months back on cryptocurrencies, which was which can be considered as a gray area in terms of how legal is cryptocurrencies in India. Because of this circular, many banks have denied cryptocurrency transactions, meaning you cannot use Indian money or conventional money to buy cryptocurrencies through their banking app services. I think in India only MobileWiki is allowing purchase of cryptocurrency through their servers and not vice versa. So what happened is many cryptocurrency experts and many cryptocurrency activists are saying that RBI is arbitrarily imposing a shadow ban on trade of cryptocurrencies in India. It seems that a few days back, our finance minister herself came out and said that the government is not against the idea of cryptocurrency, but there are a lot of modalities that have to be understood and studied as to what the impact of cryptocurrencies are going to have on the Indian economy. And everybody thought that was a stance or a statement from the government in a direction towards legalization of cryptocurrencies in India. But with this statement from the RBI governor indicating that they have major concerns as to cryptocurrency, this does not bode well for the cryptocurrency ecosystem in India. Many of the suggestions that I have been seeing in terms of cryptocurrency in India is India must adopt a policy what China has adopted. China doesn't recognize cryptocurrency as such, but they are okay with Chinese citizens creating their own cryptocurrencies and selling it in other countries. Many suggest that India should also adopt the same policy, meaning we can create cryptocurrencies in India and we not trade them in India, but we trade them at other places, gaining some sort of a foothold into the future of economy that some calls as. So the bottom line is cryptocurrency is still a gray area in India, and the RBI is still not set on as to whether they accept cryptocurrency as a form of currency or a form of legal tender in India or not. Moving on, Hong Kong seals of attainment vigil site. This is the first time that Hong Kongers were denied access to the vigil site commemorating the Tiananmen massacre. Now, though China was very angry with the Hong Kongers in the earlier years as to these people were conducting vigils at this park every year on the Remembrance Day of China's 1989 crackdown on hundreds and thousands of college students who rose up against the communist model of China in 1989. Relatively till now, Hong Kongers were allowed to protest at this site. So year on year end, the number of people attending this vigil as a form of protest against the Chinese control of Hong Kong grew in size. Since China took over the control of Hong Kong completely in the last year, where they have been changing the entire identity of Hong Kong itself together, for the first time in many years, China has denied, or at least the Hong Kong government, which is controlled directly by the Chinese government, denied permission for the vigil to be conducted for the first time in past few years. Protesters who went ahead despite the police ban and everything were arrested, and there is a lot of fear among the Hong Kong citizenry itself that even if they go or at least display some sort of a commemorative stance over the massacre or the Chinese crackdown, there is going to be a reprisal from the authorities. So it is the final nail in the coffin as to what is the situation in Hong Kong, because with this denial of permission, the complete transformation of Hong Kong from a free democratic state to a complete Chinese controlled state has been completed. Now there is no freedom of expression for any type of stance or protest against the Chinese Communist Party leadership. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি।